Hi everyone, welcome to Stereo Niche. I'm Scott Schneider. This week I want to talk about Kenwood, and specifically the Kenwood 11. So come right back. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Kenwood. Now, for me, as a collector, I've not really run across a lot of Kenwood units over the years. I don't know if they just weren't that popular, or they just didn't catch the mainstream as much as other manufacturers like Pioneer and Technics and Marantz, etc. But the ones I have run across, I've really liked them. I think that they had some unique features, and I thought they were pretty cool. Now, Kenwood, from what I did some research on earlier, started in the 1940s, but really didn't get started until the 60s. And they were part of Trio, and they were part of Lafayette. They had some history with Radio Shack. So it was a manufacturer from Japan, and went through several iterations. But it was in the late 60s when Trio, one of the managers at Trio, apparently came up with the Kenwood name and literally made it up. Ken was apparently a popular name in Japan, and he combined it with wood because it had some traction here, Hollywood, etc., and put the two together and came up with Kenwood. And I never knew that until just recently, by the way. So learning a little bit of history myself. But if you're familiar with the Trio line, it was, I think, pretty much always considered a very high-end line. There was the Kenwood Trio components there for a while. I've seen some of those. The 700M comes to mind. Very, very nice units. But during the 70s, I think Kenwood was viewed more so as a little bit more of a budget line. But, to be fair, when I pick up these units, they don't feel very budget-minded to me. They do feel, very 70s, overbuilt, etc., compared to other models. Maybe not quite the heft of, some of the Sensuis and Marantzes, but still, you have something when you pick it up. This particular unit, it actually came with a group of receivers I bought several years ago. So I've had it for 3 or 4 years now, and it's kind of unique. It has, I think they were trying to give you more bang for the buck in a way. It had some cool features like a timer, to built-in timer, so you could turn it to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. It would play and then shut off by itself. Not a feature I think I've seen on really any other receiver. So that was sort of unique to Kenwood, I believe. Ended up, by the way, it's now kind of a weak point. That feature is basically a plastic rod that goes all the way through to the back of the unit for the timer. And that is a weak point. And I've seen many of these where the timer is broken. So just an FYI. So it's kind of cool. I love the display on these. It sort of sets itself apart. It's kind of a bright, dial face, and it has meters and, a lot more going on. I wanted to find the MSRP. I could not find it, but if anyone happens to know that, I would appreciate it. So the 11 was introduced as 3 different models. It was the 11.1, the 11.2, and 11.3. And as far as I can tell, the only difference between them is the power. So the 11.1 was 60 watts, the 2, which is what this is, was 80 watts, and the 3 was 110 watts. So that was the only difference that I'm aware of between the 1, 2, and 3. And other than that, they were pretty much the same. This one is in pretty nice shape. It works great. I mean, very good physical shape, and works very nicely and has a really nice smooth sound to it. So let me jump into the metrics here, and you can watch some slow-mo video of the unit and be right back. All right, the Kenwood 11 II. Well, let's talk about actually the Kenwood 1, 2, and 3 of the 11 series. So this was 3 different models of called 11, and they were only differentiated by the Roman numeral at the end, 1, 2, and 3. So the only difference that I'm aware of between them is the power rating, and so the scoring will pretty much be the same for all of them, except just to note that there's a slight difference in the power rating. If you had the 3, it would get 5 more points. So just to make sure I cover that one more time, the 1 was 60 watts, the 2, which is what this one is, was 80 watts, and the 3 was 110 watts. So looking at the points, for 80 watts, which is what this one is, it gets 15 points. Now, as if you've seen my other videos, what I do give bonus points for is if it can handle 4 ohm speaker loads. So that's very important. If you have a receiver and it can only handle 8 ohm, you don't have access to a lot of different speakers, like ADS, for example, who are most of their models were 4 ohm. So you really wouldn't want to try and hook that up to your receiver. But the Kenwood 11 model line can handle 4 ohm loads. So you can hook up those speakers, and for that reason, it gets 30 more points. So great feature and spec to have. Always make sure you check that, by the way, on any of your gear. So 30 points for the 4 ohm. Moving into phono. Has 2 phonos on it, very nice, so you can hook up 2 turntables. Doesn't have the ability for MC cartridges, but it's still nice to have 2 phonos. If you've got 2 nice turntables, hook those up. You can hook up, most of the time I think people have their own MC preamp anyway, so probably not a huge deal, but having 2 phonos is very nice. So that gets 20 points, by the way. So moving on into sources. So it has 2 tape connections and 1 auxiliary. So you can hook up 3 different sources to it, and for that it gets 30 points. Moving on into controls. So it has balance, of course, and it has a loudness switch. So it has both of those, 5 points each. Moving into tone controls. Doesn't have a tone defeat, but it does include mid-range. So on this one you have the bass, mid-range, and the treble. So adding in the mid-range is kind of it's not so common feature. So it gets 5 points each for those. And then it does have nice high-low filtering on it. So that's a very nice feature to have, which is 10 points. Power meters. Has power meters. It has pretty much all kind of cool stuff here. But I love the interface. It has cool power meters here. That I think everything sort of it seems to make sense how it's positioned and how they put the interface together. So I've always kind of liked it. I think it's kind of cool. It's very bright and lit up, but in addition, it just sort of makes sense here. So power meters, another 20 points. It does have pre-out amp-in connections on the back. So if you ever decided you want to separate the preamp from the amp, you have that ability here. You can do that. So also for hooking up EQs too, if you decide to do that. So 20 points for that. On to AC connections. So has 2 AC, has 1 switched and 1 unswitched. So gets 10 points and 5 points respectively for that. And then speaker inputs. So you can hook up 3 sets of speakers here. So you've got 3 sets. The other thing I'd like to point out is that speaking of connections for speakers, the speaker connection on the back, I like these the connections here. So on some of the older gear, I think mostly on Pioneer, for example, has those little spring-loaded tabs for speakers. And the little hole for putting in your speaker wire is very small sometimes, and you really can't get a nice heavy gauge wire in there, which is a bit frustrating. But this style of connector here, which you saw in the slow-mo video, allows you to put a pretty heavy gauge in there and sync it down. So I like that feature. It takes a little bit more energy than pushing in the tab and sliding it in. You have to tighten it down a good bit, but gives you more a higher gauge wire that you can put in there. You don't have to connecting and disconnecting things that often, but at least it does accommodate a larger gauge, which is a nice feature. So let's see. So looking at total points here, if you're keeping up, that gives it a total of 215 points, which is pretty respectable. I think it's a great bang for the buck. I don't run across a lot of Kenwoods, but when I do, you know, they don't have the they don't aren't selling in the current collectible market at like a Pioneer or a Marantz. But I think you get a lot of value here. I think it sounds great. I think they're very smooth, and it has, you know, some cool extra features like the timer, has dimmer switch, you know, for the lights, and you know, just little features that a lot of other receivers of the day didn't provide. So if you're interested in a Kenwood, I think that if you're looking for that nostalgia and looking for that silver face, I think you really get everything here for a much lower, you know, cost of entry, if you will. So if you've got one, you know, let me know your thoughts, let me know your experience. I did want to mention again that the only weak point I'm familiar with is this timer. It's a mechanical failure a lot of times. I think it's a plastic rod that goes all the way through to the back, and eventually it'll break. It can be fixed, but I think a lot of people, including myself, if it were to break, I would just bypass it. I don't find it to be a useful feature. This one is working, that's fine, but if I had to do something to it, I would just bypass it and not worry about it. But anyway, that is the Kenwood 11. Again, let me know if you've got one, what your thoughts and experience are with it. And as always, thank you all for tuning in. And if you like these videos, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.